Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Nick Yuskevich once again here with Daily Fantasy Winners and back for another episode of Tee to Green. And for this week's episode, it is the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. And this is, if you somehow don't know this, this is at one of the most gorgeous golf courses, or just quite frankly places in the world, located Pebble Beach, California, in the Monterey area, which is a little bit south of San Jose, and more specifically just south of Santa Cruz along the Pacific Ocean. And so we will get into the specifics of Pebble Beach and the three different golf courses that are used at this tournament in just a minute. But some specifics about the tournament. There are three different courses used. They'll be used Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Golfers will be spread out all over all three courses all 3 days, and each golfer will get to play each course once, basically Thursday through Saturday, and then there will be a cut applied. So this is very similar to the Career Builder Challenge 3 weeks ago. And so so the cut is after 54 holes. Saturday's round, maybe Sunday if they run into some weather delays, which is possible, actually, given the weather, which we will touch on in just a minute. But in any case, three different courses being used, and then they will return to Pebble Beach for the final round. So 36 holes at Pebble Beach, 18 at Spyglass Hill, and then 18 holes at Monterey Peninsula Country Club. Those are the three courses being used. We'll get on the details and those in just a second. But a couple other things about what you need to know about the tournament perspective. This is a pretty good field. It's not an outstanding field, not major championship WGC quality, but it's another good field. We've had a few of them in a row with Torrey Pines, the Waste Management Phoenix Open. We got another solid one this week as well. Jason Day, Jordan Spieth, Dustin Johnson, Brandt Snedeker, those guys are in it. Phil Mickelson, Justin Rose, all those guys, so they're in this, and it should be a pretty solid field. Depth-wise, it's a little so-so, but it's fine overall. And then the last thing I'll touch on is details about this tournament from a DFS perspective is the salary structure. It's another weird week for salaries on DraftKings, and yeah, I don't like it, and I don't know why. And there's some other people. I just kind of reading the Twitter buzz, just generally speaking, it seems like people aren't too big of a fan of it. I mean, men's salary $6,400, but really probably the bigger issue is you've got guys that are, you can just take a look at the 7 and 6K range. You can take a look at our odds per dollar tab on DailyFantasyWinners.com, and you'll kind of get an idea what I'm talking about. But in any case, they're experimenting with their salary structure and their algorithm a little bit, and so I guess we kind of got to bear with that a little bit. And so, but it's the hand we're dealt this week, so that's what we got to deal with. And so, in any case, because of this, making cash lineups will be very easily. Again, check out our odds per dollar tab on under the tools at DailyFantasyWinners.com, where we do have the players' sportsbook odds. Basically versus their DraftKings salary, and it gives you the best odds per dollar essentially, and gives you the best value from top to bottom. So you can check that out there. And I'll in the forum section I'll have the list of players as far as who should be highly owned, of the lower price players that you may want to consider fading in GPPs, and this just some of my favorite plays at each price range. But we'll get into picks at the end of the video. But for now, we will dive into the details of the golf courses. Pebble Beach, Spyglass Hill, Monterey Peninsula. Those are the three different courses being used. Pebble's a par 72. Spyglass Hill's a par 72. Monterey Peninsula a par 71. All three golf courses are in the 6,800 yard range. They're all very short courses. Some of the shortest courses the pros play on each year. And there are 4 par 5s at Pebble, 4 par 5s at Spyglass Hill, and 3 par 5s at Monterey Peninsula. And there are about 2 to 3 eagles. 2 to 3 holes on the golf course, on each golf course, where you have the potential of getting an eagle without a long hole out of hitting the green under regulation essentially. And so it depends on the weather conditions a little bit, and again I'll touch on the weather in a minute here. But when we look at eagles here, we want to know, does driving distance matter? Because, are these par 5s like 600 yards, and do we need a bomber who's going to hit a 340 off the tee and then run a 3-wood up there from, 260, 270, whatever it might be? Basically, does driving distance here help a little bit? Yes, but it really is not that much, and I wouldn't focus on it. We really haven't had that many tournaments so far on the West Coast where driving distance really plays a major factor from an eagle perspective, with really the exception of Torrey Pines. That's a course where it helps a little bit, certainly, but again, we're not in that territory right now. So I really wouldn't focus on the driving distance angle too much here from an eagle perspective. So a couple other details about the golf courses. These courses are basically all on the Pacific Ocean. Some of the golf holes on some of the courses are more protected than others and not quite on the coast. But some of the golf holes do really go right along the Pacific Ocean, and especially at Pebble Beach. This is true for all three courses, but it's especially true at Pebble Beach. There is the course is exposed, meaning it can be very windy there at times. And it actually was very windy and very rainy there today, meaning Tuesday. And I actually tweeted out a couple videos if you want to get an idea of what kind of weather Pebble Beach got. One was these were both Instagram videos. One was done by Charlie Hoffman, and another was, I think it was Jimmy Walker. And they were standing on top of the 7th tee, and you can just see standing water and like a river basically running through the 7th green. And if you don't know what hole 7 is at Pebble Beach is a short downhill par 3 right along at the corner of a cliff of the Pacific Ocean. It's a downhill par 3, just a little over 100 yards. And they're literally punching like mid-irons into this green because of how crazy the weather was. I'm not saying the weather is going to be that brutal, this week or anything like that, but the course is going to be very soft, and there is rain that's expected to come on Thursday and Friday potentially. And so it's a good thing to note for two reasons. Number one, is the fact that you may, from a strategy standpoint, you may want to consider using some golfers that are usually good in bad weather. There's actually a tool on FantasyLabs, I believe it's called WinScore, and we do stuff with FantasyLabs a little bit. In any case, all I was going to say is you should definitely check them out, and you can take a look at kind of which golfers are better in bad conditions or in windy conditions, I should more say, versus others. And if you've been following golf for a while and you have been playing, or maybe just been playing daily fantasy golf, maybe you also have an idea of which golfers can be better in windier conditions or more tougher courses than normal. And it's not this black and white, but usually European players sometimes are a little bit better than American golfers when it comes to conditions like this. It's not that black and white, but you can look. But generally speaking, that's kind of what plays into the role sometimes, and you see it happen at the British Open or the Open Championship. You see it happen. You see it happen there sometimes. So it's just an important thing to know from that angle. And the second thing is you might be thinking, what about tee times? Because if there's bad weather supposed to come. Remember, there are 3 different golf courses being used, and the tee times are really only in like a couple hour intervals essentially on each course, because all 3 courses are being used all 3 days. So there's not an AM versus PM wave type of a thing where we would see it at a traditional PGA Tour tournament. So you don't have to worry about tee times and weather. The only thing you should consider weather-wise is really is who is maybe better in windy, rainy type of conditions. So to clear that up, and so. We started on strategy, so we'll use this as a segue to get into strategy. So there were 4 things. One was the good wind and rain players. There are 3 other things we can look at. Good course history and good West Coast players generally. Usually this is a tournament where good course history does come into play. I find this to be I think this makes sense actually, just because usually every golfer has played at least 1, if not 2, maybe even 3 tournaments just in January before coming coming to play at Pebble Beach. So usually people can kind of get on a roll and get their feet when you know kind of who's playing well, and it kind of makes sense from that perspective. Also, course history makes sense here, and I have walked Pebble Beach. I went to the U.S. Open in 2010 at Pebble Beach, and I know a decent amount of people that have played it as well. And so I will just say it makes sense because there are a lot of little details you need to know about Pebble Beach, just in terms of, the greens aren't that big, so you really need to position yourself well off the tee. There are a few blind tee shots out there. There are some places where you really do not want to be above the hole because a lot of those greens can be severely sloped in certain spots. And it's just a course where it really does help playing there a little bit, actually, as far as if you have a little bit of experience there, that could certainly help. And it's a course that a lot of times when you get onto courses like this where you can just be really comfortable on it or you're not, that comes into play at Pebble Beach a little bit. And so yeah, good history and good West Coast players. So we've seen like Dustin Johnson's played well here in the past, Brandt Snedeker's played well here in the past. Jimmy Walker's played well here in the past, and there's good history for you kind of see the same names here pop up frequently, and so that's a good thing to pay attention to here. It kind of speaks for itself. But a lot of those players I just mentioned are also usually good players on the West Coast as well, and there just seems to be a pretty good trend there as well. So good course history and West Coast players. The third thing we want to focus on, I just touched on this briefly, is just people who are in good form. And like I said, there are people that or all the golfers usually have played at least a couple rounds and they've gotten their feet wet a little bit now when they're not shaking off the holiday rust and things of that nature and in the off season essentially. So that's the third thing. And then the last thing is from the statistics angle. Diving into statistics, it's really hard to get something on a statistics angle because there are 3 different golf courses being used, and you only have a 36-hole sample size at Pebble Beach and an 18-hole sample size at Monterey Peninsula, and 18-hole sample size at Spyglass Hill. And I mean, over the course of several years, so it's multiplied. But at the same time, you're not having 72 holes worth of data, per year, so it's a little bit tougher to find something statistically that stands out. Having said that, and plus also the 3 courses are all different a little bit. But having said all this, anyways, the one thing that did pop out, and I was a little surprised when I saw this, is strokes gained around the green, meaning scrambling, chipping, those kinds of things. That is what's really seems to be stand out here more than anything. And it surprised me just because that statistic usually isn't something that's that highly correlated when you look at a tournament. It's usually off the tee or approaching the green or putting. Those pop out a little bit more usually. This is around the green. And I guess when I thought about this, it does make sense a little bit logically, just because these greens at these courses are a little bit smaller than normal. And so it's tough to hit the greens because the greens, like I said, they're smaller, but it can also be very windy and the rough can be kind of penalizing. And the greens can be severely sloped. And, the greens are a little bit softer, so it might help a little bit. But nevertheless, scrambling does seem to be an important role here. And more importantly, I would say strokes gained around the greens, the better statistic to use. So that's why you've seen somebody like Graham McDowell. He had a top 10 here a couple of years ago, who also won the U.S. Open at Pebble Beach back in 2010. Like that would be a perfect example of somebody who's a really good short game and a really good scrambler, and a European player who's actually usually good in kind of those bad weather conditions. Someone who's from Northern Ireland, so like that would be an example here for you. Not saying I recommend McDowell this week. I actually, a type of a thing, but just to keep in mind. For when making your picks here. And so let's actually just move on right on into the picks, because that was the last point of the strategy. And so, okay, let's take a look at the top 3 guys. We got Dustin Johnson, Jordan Spieth, and Jason Day. From an ownership standpoint, I think Dustin will be owned the most because he has the best odds, and he's the second most expensive of the 3. I think Jordan Spieth will be the second most owned because he's consistently playing well right now. He hasn't won, but he's been the most consistent. And then Jason Day will probably be the third most owned because he's coming off a missed cut and people are still worried about his injury status. And I have no idea why. It makes no sense to me. But here's what I would say. I do think in a cash format, DJ is your best bet, then Jordan Spieth, then Jason Day. If you just want to play the odds game, that's the best way to go. DJ, Jordan, and then Jason. From a GPP perspective, I would flip it. I think Jason Day is the best, then Jordan Spieth, then Dustin Johnson. And I'm just saying that based upon because I think all 3 guys have a pretty much an equal chance to win this golf tournament. All 3 have good course history here. Dustin Johnson has won. Dustin has won here before. I don't know if I should say he should have won the U.S. Open here in 2010, but remember, Dustin was blowing out the field here in 2010 at the U.S. Open before he had just a horrific Sunday. Jordan Spieth has been consistently good here over the last handful of years, and so has Jason Day. So they all have good course history here, and if you're worried about Jason and Dustin missing the cut at Torrey Pines, I will just say this. Jason's ball striking and his long game was fantastic at Torrey Pines. It was really good. He just missed every putt possible, and Jason is one of the best putters in the world. I think he was number 1 in strokes gained putting last year, and he's been consistently one of the best putters. They were putting on Poa annua greens. The ball was bouncing around all over the place. I just really would not look much into that missed cut at all for him. That's just a rare occurrence. So I think you're getting great value on Jason Day at his price and what his ownership will be, and that's why I'm saying he's probably the best pick in GPPs. The only reason why I say he's not the best in cash a little bit is just because he hasn't played as much over the last handful of months as some of the other golfers. So I will admit there's a slight more risk to it. So that's just the only reason why I'd put him down there. But all 3 of those guys are definitely usable in cash. And I like Jason Day. If you say you like Jason Day in cash the most, I can be completely with you on that. Or that's completely fine. We're splitting hairs as far as the cash angle. But the GPP angle, I think Jason's the best there. Jordan's good for second. I mean, Jordan's the most expensive at $12K. And so uh, that some people don't want to spend up to 12K. And so his ownership probably won't be as high as DJ's, who's a little bit cheaper and has better odds. And then Dustin, of course, obviously he can win the golf tournament, no kidding. So, but if you're making a bunch of GPP lineups, you want to include all three. But I'm just saying the best value is Jason, then probably Jordan, then Dustin as far as what the ownership will be. It won't be too drastic. If you're wondering, okay, what kind of differences on the ownership, my guess is we'll see 30% out of Dustin. I do think it'll be that high. It'll probably be in that 20 to 25 range for Jordan Spieth, and it'll probably be in that 15 to 20% range for Jason Day. That would be my guess on those three, roughly, give or take. So, as far as any other picks go, I'm just going to elaborate on Brent Snedeker here very quickly because I believe I touched on him earlier. Snedeker is kind of in a funny spot. He's 10K, and granted, there's some golfers just below him in the 9K range, but Snedeker's the fourth most expensive golfer here, and a lot of people I feel like are going to see Snedeker at 10K, and they think, really, I don't really want to pay 10K for Brant Snedeker. But here's the thing, Snedeker is constantly really good at this tournament specifically, and he's also really good on the West Coast traditionally. And if you know my opinion on Brant Snedeker, it's that the only main thing that's really held him back of why he's not considered an elite player other than that sounded like a Joe Flacco conversation there. That is not what I'm trying to say. The reason why Brant Snedeker maybe isn't considered like a top 5 player on the PGA Tour. How about that? Oh, just to be a little bit more specific, because I think Snedeker is an elite player. The one thing is the rib issue has popped up for him occasionally later on in the seasons over the last handful of years, and it's been a little bit better as of late. But in any case, I do think Snedeker, from a talent perspective, is just about as good as any of them. He doesn't hit the ball quite as far as maybe Dustin Johnson or Jason Day, but I think his talent is just absolutely tremendous, and his short game is absolutely phenomenal. It's one of the best on tour, especially his putting. So for Brant, I think what you're going to see here at 10K is people are going to see 10,000 and think, I don't really want to spend 10K on Snedeker when I can just use one of the big three and then grab Phil at 9,300 or Jimmy Walker at 8,800 or Matt Kuchar at 8,600. There are going to be a lot of people doing that. So anyways, I think Snedeker's ownership is going to be pretty low, and he can very, very well win this golf tournament. So I think you're going to get some tremendous value out of Snedeker, even at 10K, which may even seem a little expensive, but I think that price is perfectly fine for him here. So I just wanted to touch up on that with Snedeker. And then lastly, as far as like a pick that I like that's a bit down in the 9K range, Justin Rose, if he is not owned 20+% in this range, I give up. Like, Justin Rose will have to win the Grand Slam for him to be owned properly, because Justin Rose, if you look at our odds per dollar tab on PGA or on DailyFantasyWinners.com, he is the third best odds per dollar, and he's only 9,200. And so just basically, and Rose is off to a good start this year. Justin Rose should be, like, in my mind, he should be 25 to 30% owned. But I bet you anything, I shouldn't say I'll bet anything. He will probably be around 20% owned, maybe even a little bit less than that. And so it's needless to say that I think that's perfectly a great place to use Justin Rose. Justin Rose played very well here last year. He always plays. I don't know if he's playing with Justin Timberlake again this year. I should have looked into that before this. Sorry about that. But he's buddies with Justin Timberlake. Played with him last year. I'm going to guess he's playing with him again this year. Read into that for whatever you want. But in any case, Justin Rose is this is a great course for Justin to excel at. He is a European player who's usually good in some bad conditions as well. So I think Rose is a great pick here. I'll be really curious to see about the ownership for him, though. But he is, and let's put it this way, worst case scenario, if he's 25% owned, something like that, that's still okay. That's still not that bad for a man of Rose's quality at 9,000 range. This isn't like a $7,000 level golfer by any means of the imagination. And Phil Mickelson's right next to him. Jimmy Walker's right next to him. Matt Kuchar's right next to him. So I don't think his ownership, there's a certain ceiling to what his ownership will probably be, though, despite how good his odds are. And so I do like Justin Rose this weekend. So that is it. Sorry, I rambled a little long there and went pretty quickly. So hopefully you understood and kept up. So in any case, that is it for this week. I will have a strategy video coming for everybody soon. That will end of this weekend at the latest. I will get to that, and so I'll have that for you guys coming up shortly. And so thank you once again for watching, and as always, you can follow me on Twitter at Nick Yuskevich. Daily Fantasy Winners is on Twitter at DFantasyWinners, and if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, we very much appreciate that as well. All right, good luck, everybody.